So I do think that we're in a very different era where we're having a different conversation about what is the employer's responsibility to provide a great experience for people, and to really look at your people as people, and understand that like they need some flexibility. People have kids and they got to go pick people. We don't have a lot of support for parents in this country. Like, people need different kinds of flexibility, people with aging parents. So I think the companies that are flexible and understanding and empathetic, they are the ones that are going to retain their people. And that gives me so much hope.
You're listening to Granite Goodness, the show where we interview New Hampshire people making the world a better place. My name is Andy DeMeo, and I'm coming to you today from Treeline Outfitters in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. My guest today is my good friend Crystal Hicks, who owns and runs Job Talk, a career strategy company that helps people figure out the next steps of their professional lives. We talk about a bunch of stuff. We talk about why it's good and smart and helpful to ask for help from your friends in your professional network. We talk about Gen Z in the workplace. We talk about how to find success and purpose and maybe even a little bit of fun in ways that might sound counterintuitive. But if you ask Crystal, she would say counterintuitive is the only way to find success in anything, but particularly the professional world and looking for jobs. So we cover that and many more things on this episode of Granite Goodness. I hope you enjoy it. Crystal Hicks.
Nice to see you.
Welcome to Granite Goodness.
So nice to be here.
You are the first person who we are recording with video. That's right. Our good friend Thomas Stafford is there behind the camera. He's very handsome.
Doing a great job.
Maybe we'll bring him out. We'll have him say hi. But yeah, this is an extraordinary moment for me.
It's very full circle.
Yeah, it is.
We have a great story.
Well, I was telling...
We could spend the whole episode talking about our history, but...
Well, I want to spend it talking about you. I was explaining to you, before we started recording that it's kind of fitting. The first guest that we had on the show was, my mentor, Ian Grant from the UNH Entrepreneurship Center. And he's a wonderful guy. And, I kind of view him as like one half of the mentor pie that's really made the beautiful mess that is my life. And you're the other half. And there's a bunch of other wonderful people. But like, if I had to pick two people, you are...
That's very sweet.
The one, my wonderful job that I have that I love, like I owe that to you. You've helped a ton of my friends. You are... I explain a little bit in the intro, like who you are and what you do, but I want to hear in your own words, Crystal Hicks. How do you think of yourself? Like you're a job whisperer, a job talker? Is that accurate?
I think you're giving me too much credit.
No, not at all.
Career strategist is typically the way that I describe it. So it's kind of like a hybrid between professional strategic planning and career counseling. So
okay.
Job therapy mixed with actual tactical hands-on strategy work.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So job talk is kind of...
Job talk is my baby.
That's an accurate way to describe.
Yeah.
Well, I want to get into all that, but the first question that I was trying to ask people, given that this is a New Hampshire-oriented podcast and production, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship to the Granite State? You live here, right? You're in Dover.
I do live here, yes.
How long have you lived here? Like, what's going on?
I was born in New Hampshire. I was born in Portsmouth.
Oh, okay.
Grew up in Dover. Yep.
You're over there, right?
Literally right there, yeah, down the street. And I bought my house in Dover in October of 2020. So I like to think that my teenage self was a little disappointed. Like, girl, we were supposed to get out of here. What were you doing? Like, What do you mean we're buying a house here? Like growing up in Dover, it was very different.
Yeah.
But no, it's such a great place to live. I feel so grateful that I bought when I did. And I have roots here in a very real way. And when you travel, it makes you appreciate coming back home, I think. So it's been amazing, but I love New Hampshire.
Well, there's a fun, this is a joke we've made before on the show, but for people who are fans of Lord of the Rings, it's hard to ignore the fact that the word Shire is built into
I never thought of that.
Shire.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I actually didn't. My wife has had a Shire tattoo, like a Lord of the Rings Tolkien tattoo for like 3 years now. And she has a matching one with her dad. And that actually didn't click for me until 2 days ago.
I never put that together until you just are saying this.
Yeah,
right now.
no. And she was like, what do you mean? I've had this tattoo. And I was like, I just thought you really like Lord of the Rings. I didn't realize it was about New Hampshire. But it is. It has that feeling.
It does.
For a lot of people. Like it evokes home, smallness, locality, community, and all these things. It's interesting, though, that you said like that's a sentiment that I felt and that I feel like a lot of people have felt. You said teenage you might have felt disappointed that you're still here or that you're putting down roots here. Like, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like tell me about the emotional, like psychological transformation of, oh, I hate New Hampshire, I want to leave, to, maybe this is a place I want to build a life.
Sure. I think with growing up here and going to college at UNH, right? So staying local again. I studied abroad, which was the best thing ever. I went to Ireland in 2005. And that for me was the first time that I really had the chance to see not just the New Hampshire, but the US from a very different perspective. And it changes you, foundationally, I think makes you appreciate different things. I had done a little bit of traveling domestically prior to that. I have family in Ohio and stuff like that. But New Hampshire just felt kind of, I don't know. I was a kid, growing up in the, I'm an 80s baby. So growing up in like the 90s, early 2000s, watching Sex and the City. I was a journalism major at UNH, right? And I'm thinking, I'm going to move to the city someday. And I wanted to be Carrie Bradshaw, Yeah. So for me, it was always just New Hampshire felt very small and limiting.
Right.
And it was very different. And to an extent, it was a little bit more limiting back in the day. But I think the development that's happened in the last 15 years has been absolutely incredible. Gentrification is a whole other topic. But, that's why I say I feel very fortunate that I bought my house when I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, even Thomas and I were talking about on the way down here, the joy that can come from, just deciding to build culture here. Like I think a lot of people feel, we were talking about, the music scene, right? And, a lot of folks, they'll say the scene is somewhere else. There's other people, there's other amazing musicians in other places doing things. And it's like, this weekend the show's going to be about you now, Thomas. But he's, filming like a jazz festival at UNH.
Love that.
Because they put on this incredible thing that, maybe they could do a better job of getting the word out about it. And it's like, wow, we have so much here that like we can treasure. And
totally,
like there's great artists, there's great culture, and
look at Prescott Park Arts Festival.
Yeah.
Look at the music hall. I mean, I'm Jimmy's Jazz Club. I mean, there's been so many phenomenal acts that now come here.
Right.
That as a kid, I would have never imagined. I mean, we had the Strand Movie Theater in Dover, which bless its heart is still beating. I don't know what even happens there anymore, but it was always like the B string movies, you know? So it's like this idea of getting like really top acts now and having a real scene. Have it, to your point, having culture here that feels like a Seacoast culture.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot of people that dedicated a lot of time, energy, and effort to building something very hyper local and very real.
Yeah.
That felt authentic to the Seacoast. And now it's so cool to see it thriving.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. Well, actually a good friend of mine, a wonderful guy, his name's Troy Farkas.
Yes.
Yeah. He moved here kind of like by accident. Like he just ended up living here and then fell in love with it and thought it was such an incredible place, kind of this coastal area, the seacoast of New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, that he has his own
podcast,
other show about seacoast stories that, I'm going to plug because it's great. And it's just like, there is a really special thing. And, that's just this particular area. Right.
Yep.
But like, I mean, there's all these beautiful treasures across. I mean, just watch New Hampshire Chronicle, for God's sake. Like Fritz Weatherby is my dream guest. But this is a good segue, Crystal, if not an elegant one, to, we're here talking about building up New Hampshire, building all these things, arts, culture, people, economy, work, all that. That's kind of your jam.
This is my lane.
So let's start there. Can you tell us a little bit the story of, you're a career strategist. How did that happen? Like,
the long and short of it would be, imagine yourself back in college, trying to figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life.
Well, that's actually when I met you.
Right? Yeah, this is true.
It's not hard.
Oh, you came to me. That's right. I was helping you with that.
Right.
Well, I didn't have me in college.
Right.
So I was a journalism major and thought this is what I want to do. Right. And I was very fortunate that my internship last semester of my senior year taught me everything I don't like about the career. And so I actually graduated with this feeling of, oh my God, what do I do now if I don't want to be a daily paper journalist?
Yeah.
Right. And my dad had passed away really unexpectedly my junior year. And then my best friend that I lived with died as well in that same year. And so there was a lot going on in my life when I was graduating college.
Yeah.
Thank God for bartending, right? 2007, I come back home from my internship. I had moved like an hour away, worked at a paper in like Southern New Hampshire, and came back to the Seacoast, started bartending downtown Portsmouth, and thought, I just need a break. I just need a year to get myself in order. And the recession was looming, right?
Right.
And I was watching a lot of my friends have to move back into their parents' house because they were losing their jobs. And I was just very, very grateful to have the income that I did from bartending, which I had bartended all through college, right? And so a friend of mine had said, you should go to a temp agency and see if they have any like copywriting work or whatever. Cause I had said 1 year, I'm giving myself the 1 year break and then I'm going to go use this degree that I'm paying for. Right. I was still writing checks, hard checks, sending them in to pay my student loans. And, I went into this staffing agency probably a year after graduation and said, hey, do you have any writing stuff? And they were like, nope. And I was like, okay, great. Good chat. See you later.
The answer is no.
And then they called me back about 2 weeks later and said, hey, we really liked you when you came in. You have great personality. Do you want to work for us?
Yeah.
And so I kind of fell backwards into this just administrative role at first, working for this staffing firm, a sector I knew nothing about. Nobody had ever talked to me about the employment sector in college. I didn't even know what HR was.
Yeah.
I was a journalism major. I wasn't in the business school. And that really, for me, opened up the world of, oh, wow, there's these people that like place people in companies. And it's this weird corporate matchmaking kind of situation. Like, it was so fascinating to me, the psychology behind why certain people were getting the jobs over other people, and just very, very fascinating. So that led into me getting promoted into a staffing manager position. I transitioned out of staffing into career services because I really wanted to work with college students. I thought if I can help people before they need a temp agency, that's really making the impact I want to make.
Yeah.
And so I took a job at a community college in Portsmouth that's no longer open, but had about 500 students. And I was just the career services advisor for that location and just really helped students figure out what they could do with their major and help place them in jobs after graduation. And then UNH came calling, alma mater, right? Hey, we've got this position open on our employer relations team, and we need somebody with your background. And luckily the first college I worked for paid for my master's degree. So I always tell my students, do not pay for a graduate degree. This is a very common benefit.
Was that SNU? It wasn't SNU.
It was Hesser College.
Okay.
Yeah, they're no longer around, but a lot of my colleagues from Hesser went to SNU.
Okay.
So at UNH, it was great. And in between, I had also worked at a jail for 3 years, like one morning a week doing a pre-release employment counseling program.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was a passion project, but also just, I'm from Dover.
Yeah.
The opioid epidemic was such a real thing in Dover. I had a lot of friends that got caught up in that and died from that. And so I was just literally at the jail talking to them about internships for my criminal justice students when I was at Hesser College, doing career services. And they were like, hey, we really like, your energy. Would you ever want to like do something here? And I was like, well, I could maybe give you one morning a week. And so I did that for 3 years and built a program and just helped people kind of transition back into the community and find gainful employment. And so jobs have always been my job, right? Like, it's always been my love. And so when I was at UNH, when I met you, right, working with students and at that point now working with 220 different majors, and I got promoted a few times and then wound up being the director and had a team of 6, and it was amazing. And I saw myself there forever, but it was still financially challenging because it's a state-funded nonprofit higher education institution.
Yeah.
And then Lindt Chocolate, one of my favorite employers, came calling and said, hey, we have a corporate recruitment manager position. We need somebody with your background, better internship programs, all this kind of stuff that we need. And so I migrated over into the corporate world and finally made some good money and was able to pay off all my student loan debt and save up money. And I gave my boss, I think probably after 2.5 years there, I was really burning out. I was working probably 60 hours a week regularly. Wow. I was a team of 1 doing all corporate recruitment for the US headquarters. So
did they give you any chocolate?
I gained 20 pounds.
But it felt so good, though. It felt so
amazing. And yeah, I gave my boss, my VP of HR, a 12-month notice and said, I think I really need to get back into career counseling. I miss it and I want to try this. And she was very supportive. So April of 2019, launched Job Talk full time and left corporate, and here we are.
Yeah. And that, that's a lot of stuff I didn't even know about you, which is really great. And I don't want to get into it, but for some context, we had 2 touch points along that journey. You know, I did come to you as a student at UNH, and I don't even remember. I probably had some harebrained idea of what the hell I thought I was going to do or wanted to do. And, you know, it's like that great quote, you know, I didn't probably remember what you said, but I remembered how you made me feel. And it was the first time in my higher ed experience that I had interacted with somebody and they took a thing that until then had been anxiety inducing, you know, this thing looming, right? You're in college.
Life.
Everyone's
Life
asking
college.
you, right? Like, it's like the black hole, you know, you don't want to talk about it at, you know, Christmas dinner or whatever. And your uncles and, you know, stuff are always asking, like, you're like, I don't know what I'm going to do, you know? But, you know, talking to you, like, I came away from that conversation just feeling really, really good, and in a way that was new to me. And you probably got a sense, I mean, again, this is like your whole thing. That's why I sent all my friends to you. You know, you do have this really, really special, you know, skill and ability of taking a thing that most people, I think, dread thinking about. Maybe not most people, but
Many people.
Yeah. We're used to thinking of, you know, even the word work, even, right? Like, I mean, work's work, but like we could have a whole,
that could be a whole,
episode
series
on the psychology of, you know, work and labor and all that whatnot. But I met you as a lost, wayward student. You helped me feel not that way. And then when I was thinking of making a big change in my professional life, and at the same time, I was like, oh, Crystal, look at that. She just launched her thing. This is going to be a good, I think how I thought of it to myself at the time, I was like, all right, I'll pay for a session. And, you know, if nothing else, double check, is my plan for what I want to do smart? And like, you really, really helped me. And, you know, a couple of years after that, the perfect job opportunity for me opened up. And you remembered like our conversation perfectly.
Yeah.
It was like, I couldn't believe it. There was like a particular employer that I had really wanted to work at for years. I'm there now. It's Impacts Asset Management in Portsmouth. They're amazing. I love it.
Quick
great
plug.
Yeah, great company.
Great company.
Transition to sustainable economy. Let's go. And you know, that place had been like my goal, and we had one conversation about it. And then just like years passed, and you reached out to me and said, you'll never guess who I'm working with to like help, you know, staff a position. And I was like, I had 2 little interactions with you, and just like, they both changed the course of my life. And I just, on a personal level, I can attest to like I don't know, there's a whole line of questions that I could go into. Put it this way. On a personal level, I can attest to, you know, the value and sincerity that you bring to your relationship with every client, every person that you work with. And that made a difference in my life. And I think it's still often shocking for people, you know, I guess when they run across somebody like you who, I don't know, again, takes this thing, work, and just like turns it into something they don't have to be afraid of. So
thank you.
I don't know.
That was a lot of flattery in one.
It was. I'm probably going to cut some of that out.
I'm blushing.
It's just like, I have so many opinions about you
No.
that are positive.
No, I appreciate it. But you're touching on something. I've always kind of joked that like with my brain, it's a little bit of a blessing and a curse, because sometimes I'll have a session with someone, and this definitely happened a lot with students, right? Because sometimes, like, I was seeing 7 to 8 students a day at UNH, right? But not everybody was memorable in the same way that others were. And like, you were really consistent. You would come in a lot. We got to know each other. And that for me was...
That's good.
Yeah, no, it was...
Good on me.
It was a good thing. And, you know, I would see somebody in public, you know, a couple years later, and I won't remember the name, but I'll remember what we talked about. I'll remember the company that you were excited about. Like, those are the details that wind up sticking with me.
Yeah.
And you were always what I would call like one of my sustainability kids, because sustainability was such a, I mean, we talked about Alex Freed and like other people you've had on your podcast, like people that were really ambitious college students that wanted to get into this conservation, sustainability ecosystem that was starting to bubble up work-wise.
Yeah.
And so you were memorable, you were memorable in all the right ways. And so, fast forward with Job Talk, 80% of what I do is working with individual job seekers, right? But about 20% is working directly with companies. And that could look at like a lot of different things. But Impacts was so unique because the work I was doing with them was actually process centered. We were overhauling their hiring process and building in more equity. And former President Joe Keefe, right? He was such a huge proponent of equity in the hiring process, which I so appreciate.
Right.
And we wound up doing all this great work. COVID hits. And then he, looking back now, he kind of like, not tricked me, but it was smart the way he approached it. He was like, well, we've built out all these new processes and documents and all these things. Could we like demo this maybe with like, could you want to fill a couple roles for us? And like, we'll pay you to fill these roles, but like we can demo and dry run all these new processes. And so one of those first roles was the one that came up. And I said to, Anna and a few other people, I said, wow, do I have like a really stellar
I'm going to drag this guy up
for you.
Drag him out of the mud.
And I just remember, I think I had just pulled you in to talk to my class at UNH. Teaching at UNH at that point. And so we had just had like a catch up.
Right.
And I knew that this was still of interest. And so it just, the stars kind of aligned that way. But
yeah, Joe's a wily guy.
I know, right? I don't know what he's doing now. I heard he retired.
Yeah,
right? But
happily. The last time I saw him, I ran into him in the wine aisle at Hannaford's in York, Maine. And it was very romantic. It was Valentine's Day, actually. And I was being a bad husband. No, well, that was actually the night before his retirement party. But I want to get him on too. He would be a great guest.
Hey, listen, as for a little old white man who was so about gender equity, that was just screaming from the rooftops. I mean, he was memorable.
Yeah.
No,
Love
that.
He is one of a kind. So something specifically that I wanted to ask you about, right? This is a show about optimism. A lot of people feel cynical, right? About just like all kinds of things in the professional world, but like work, looking for jobs. It's really hard to look for work. Anyone who is living can identify with that statement. But you're someone who's in the unique position of, intimately what it's like to talk to people looking for jobs and to look, to talk to folks who are hiring for jobs. Mm-hmm. And this is a completely open-ended question, but like, I want to hear your opinions. What do you wish that both sides of that equation understood about the other one, right? Like, make it more human-oriented. That's what I think you do well. You take this thing that feels bureaucratic and, not human-oriented, like you make it personable and maybe even a little fun, God forbid. So I don't know. What do you wish people understood better?
That's a really great question. I think I'm always telling clients, my clients that are candidates, right, that are applying for jobs. I always kind of have to remind them that we have to really abandon common sense when we're in our job search, because
I like where this is going.
I've blogged about it on my website already. Yeah, it's funny how this little logical voice, right? We're such logical, like we're humans, we're pattern seeking. Yeah. So we say to ourselves, okay, well, I'm applying to these jobs and I'm not getting calls back. So I must be doing something wrong and I must need to change up what I'm doing, and then I'll get a different outcome.
Right.
In every other part of our life, that can work.
Yeah.
In job hunting, you just don't have control over these variables a lot of times. So much of it is just kismet, the right person seeing your resume at the right time. And, even just getting to the offer. So much of this stuff is out of our control. So the common sense voice in our head that typically says, oh, look at this job description. I am a perfect fit for this job.
Right.
I'm obviously going to get a call. And it's like, oh my God, if only, if only it were about being qualified right now to get a phone call. But so we have to kind of abandon our logical perspectives of these situations that are happening. And also in there, we have to remember that it's not personal. And I know that a lot of people say this, like, oh, don't take a rejection personally, right? For job hunting. And then candidates are like, well, how could I not take it personally? This is my life. This is my well-being. This is my income. I have kids. I got a family to take care of. It's personal to me. So the thing that I'm always saying to candidates is we have to treat it almost a little bit more sterilely, stringently, like if we can remove the emotion from job hunting as much as possible.
Yeah.
And there's processes I work on with my clients that we focus on this, right? But it's just that feeling of right now, job hunting feels like you're running an emotional marathon, but the finish line keeps moving.
Yeah.
And that amount of emotional resilience you need to move through this process right now is so real.
Right.
So I always just tell people, like, you have to be kind to yourself. You're going to apply to so many jobs that you're a really great fit for.
Yeah.
And you might not even get a call. And it might have nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
It just has more to do with someone else.
Right.
And maybe that's another candidate that got that phone call, or maybe it's the company promoted an internal, or they promoted an intern, or whatever. But it wasn't that they just didn't like you or didn't like your resume. Same thing with follow-up, right? People are like, oh my gosh, well, I'm following up even, and no one's getting back to me. It's like, well, we can't, the lack of a response when you're following up to a job application, the lack of response is not a measurement of your candidacy for the job.
Right.
And that's another thing where in real life, if I was calling you like, Andy, why are you not calling me back? Like, did I do something? Did I step in it? Did I piss you off? Like, what happened? Like, are you mad at me? Like, so we have these very human tendencies to try to apply that kind of logic to our job search. And it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
There's so many reasons why someone might not get a call that are completely outside of their control. So be kind to yourself, right? And on the flip side, for employers, one of the things I'm always telling employers is to use your words, to be more human in the process. So, this boils down to even just being really transparent in the job descriptions, right? If you know that you and your hiring managers are not going to read these freaking cover letters,
right?
Please don't just not require it. Put language in the actual job description that says, hey, in lieu, please submit your resume,
right? But
in lieu of a cover letter, please just answer these 2 questions or these 3 questions. And that way also everyone's answering the same questions. And now we're building in more equity to our process.
Yeah.
So I think with employers, it's like there's so many painful points of job hunting.
Yeah.
And they're just sort of like, well, business as usual, post the role. Let's see who we get. Let's do the same thing we've always done. And it's like, can we change this up a little bit to improve the candidate experience?
Yeah.
Like, look, when was the last time you applied to something through your own applicant tracking system?
Right.
How painful is it? How sticky is it? Right. We make decisions one click at a time now as humans, as consumers.
Yeah.
We have to remember that if there's too many barriers to getting from start to finish of that application for a candidate, you're going to have a very high drop rate.
Right.
You're not going to have people complete the application.
Yeah.
So what can we do to pare this down? So it's a much easier process for people. It's not so painful. So I think that it's just really trying to put yourself in the other person's shoes and leading with empathy as much as possible in that process.
Yeah. Who would be against that? You'd be surprised.
If it was obvious, I wouldn't get these phone calls.
Yeah. That's true. Yeah. Are people, it's so fun. Like, I like that the first thing you said was the way to find success in this is to do something that's counterintuitive, right? And like, that's step one. You have to take this relational way of analyzing problems in your life. It works all other times, but in this way, it's different. When you were talking, it almost reminded me of the process. I'm very fortunate. My wife and I, bought a house last year.
Congrats.
Thanks.
Yeah.
It was really hard, a crazy time. And it's similar in that here is this thing that, for most people, against, like, you'll have many jobs in your life, but like, not that many, in theory, maybe, I don't know what the averages
12.
are. Yeah, 12. Yeah. Of course, exactly what it is, right?
10 to 12.
Maybe the average person doesn't have 12 houses, but, each job it's a personal decision, like it's a direction of your life. It's a change in circumstances. It's a deeply personal thing. And, that I just kept thinking about that during the process of like, learning about the real estate world and all that. It just, most people only ever do this one time if they're lucky, right now. And there is so much pressure pushing against, all the aspects of buying a home that you would want to be human oriented, like it's deeply personal, it's a home, even the word home, right? Like it's not a dwelling zone, like
yes,
it's where you live and maybe want to raise a family. And just like, we were lucky in that we found success in, not totally dissimilarly from what you do. We found a house whisperer. They're also called realtors, but who is a super nice guy who's a friend of Thomas's, actually. His name's Wyatt Barrier, who knew the area really well, had a lot of connections. And, we just built a bond with him and ended up having this wonderful, really human experience where, we were able to buy a farm from, this delightful old lady who it was just too much for her anymore. And like was looking for folks just like us to come take it over. So like,
the stars aligned.
Right. Well, they did, but in some sense we had to do what, you suggest of like, if we just kind of clung to the bureaucracy of the thing, like relied on like all these mechanized ways to like find property and, talk to folks, I don't know that we would have ended up in as good a situation that we're in.
Likewise. I had very similar experience. I joke all the time, like it is a C+ world out there. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
I know we want to think that everybody's really good at their job.
Right.
It's a C+ world out there.
Get degrees.
Same. Yeah. And like my best friend of 25 years, Chelsea Moore over at Red Post Realty across the street here. She literally, I wasn't even on the market and looking anymore. And she called me out of the blue and said, there's the most crystal property in Dover right now that we need to go look at. I was like, wait, what? Are you sure? I was like renting in Portsmouth still.
Yeah.
But that's the same kind of thing. Like when I think about your situation, right? Like when I see this job description with Impacts and I'm like, oh my God, I know who we need to call.
This is the guy.
This is your guy, And so it's such a skill when you're really good at your thing and the space and the market.
Right.
When you build that network with people, it's such a real advantage. And that totally connects. I mean, I love the fact that you threaded the needle so nicely there with like the home buying process and job hunting, because there really are so many similarities.
Right.
It's people always kind of want to say, oh, it's all about who you know. And I say, yes, super helpful, but it's also about who knows you and how they feel about what they know about you.
Yeah. Oh, that's a clever. I've never heard that. It's true.
You can run with that. That's organic. Yeah. But I think it's really important to remember that the impression that we leave with people, the last time we speak to them, the last time we work with them, the last time we even network with them, right? Like that lasting impression. People always want to focus on the first impression. The last impression is so important. And so when we think about meeting these, tall orders and job descriptions and how do I get competitive? And, I'm always telling people, get some recommendations on your LinkedIn. Like that's a really helpful, because if you're the candidate and I'm the recruiter, like you're always going to tell me that you're awesome. I need other people to tell me that you're awesome. So it's like, how do you impact the people around you? Like there's this residual sort of ripple effect when you're out in the world existing. And, so much of that comes into play with what I talk to my clients about, like it's not just networking. Networking feels transactional to most people. How do we make it relational?
Yeah. I mean, I that's it. You just nailed it. Like, no one listens to me anymore. They don't have to. We'll put it this way. What I mean by that is, it's very similar to kind of how I think about this show, honestly. It's nice. Like I'm very blessed. A lot of my friends, you're my friend and you're here. But like my mom, who I love, and I mention her on every episode, and she's going to listen to this, but she thinks it's great, right? Like, of course she thinks that, Granite Goodness is cool. That's wonderful. I am so grateful to have a supportive family, and that's a blessing. I love you, Mom. I'm not that interested in what you think of it. I'm way more interested in people who I don't have a relationship with. Like if someone I don't know and have never met, they find a way to interact with me and they say, I really liked what you did and what you're putting out there. Like that actually means, it means a lot for my mom, but you know what I mean? Like, that's how, it's the same idea in, the entrepreneurship world. They call it the mom test, right? Of like, you're only going to get honest feedback on whatever thing you're doing if you don't ask your mom, right? If you find ways to...
Love is the best form of bias.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Test your thing with people who don't have a relationship with you, And so it's like, as much as I love that my friends like the show and some of them listen to it, like it's not for them, it's for everyone else in some ways, even if half the time they come on and you're my friend, but Networking is a thing I wanted to talk to you about too. I mean, that this is another area where meeting you, frankly, it was a flip switch for me when I stopped thinking of it like when I was a kid, and I think a lot of college students feel this way. Everyone says that, hey, network, it's who you know, blah, blah, blah. And you know this, they hear it and they think, why would I, okay, what is networking? I go to things I don't want to go to talk to people I don't want to talk to about things I don't really care about, you know, and it's this dumb game I have to play to get ahead, right? What are all the wrong ways? Like, tell me what's wrong about that. I know it's wrong, but you're the professional. Like, what would you say to an 18-year-old kid who says, why do I need to network? Like, why should I care about that?
I mean, just speaking from an employment lens, most of the jobs you get in life are through people you know.
Yeah.
So it's someone teeing you up. It's someone pushing your resume along to the right person, right? It's someone forwarding you a job posting. I think companies now monetize that, to be honest. There's employee referral bonuses. This is a real thing, right? Yeah. So when I worked at Lint, we had a $1,500 employee referral bonus. I think Fidelity's is $5,000.
Wow.
So companies see the value. Great talent attracts great talent, right? So networking at its basis is just, if you're job hunting, or if you know that you're going to be making a transition in the next 6 to 12 months, you don't have to shoulder the burden of that whole process yourself. And I think networking is not only a way to, yes, meet people who can help open a door, make an intro, hand off the resume, but it's also a way, I think, I call it holding up the heavy mirror. Mm-hmm. I think it's really important for us to get very self-aware. I think you're more competitive when you're self-aware. And networking is interesting because if you have a conversation with somebody who knows more about your space than you do.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of college students, right, you're coming in very green. You don't have a lot of experience yet. You don't have any exposure. So you don't know what you don't know. And when you go to like an alumni networking event, for example, right, and you're talking to somebody that works at a company or they're in a space that you're really interested in, being able to ask somebody, hey, what are the things that you feel like are super relevant in your space right now that I should maybe start learning in order to be more competitive when I apply for these roles or internships? It's holding up the heavy mirror and doing that skills gap analysis of like, I know that I'm really interested in this thing, but I know I don't have the experience yet. I know I don't have all the skills I'm going to need. I need someone to take a chance on me. Yes. But you as the candidate also have to have skin in the game and show, okay, hey, if you tell me that I want to get into data analytics. And so you tell me that Tableau is an absolute must-have skill set now, right? I need to know how to use this platform. Okay, well, if I have the resources or the time or the energy, I can go self-educate on this platform.
Right.
And so it's walking into a networking event knowing that you know so much less than almost everybody in the room.
Yeah.
And
that's a good
feeling,
thing.
Yes, exactly. And leaning into that as your superpower of like being in sponge mode.
Yeah.
And I think this is kind of where people always want to talk about extroverts and introverts at networking events. I'm someone who's very professionally extroverted, but I recharge alone. So I very much identify with introverts. And I think introverts tend to be more...
You're going to pass out after this?
I'm going to recharge my battery after. No, this is so energizing to me. This is great. But I think when people think, oh, networking, it's all for extroverts.
Right.
Because extroverts don't stop talking. And they're the ones, that aren't afraid to be loud in the room or to go up to that, executive and introduce themselves. Introverts tend to be much more they're internal processors. They're more analytical. They tend to be really excellent listeners. So they absorb and retain information in a very different way. They will wait for the right moment to ask the right question. And they can sometimes land in those moments, like really memorable insights where they might actually be more memorable than the extrovert who talked the entire time and maybe they were trying to practice their pitch. That's a big thing. Go to networking, practice your 30-second elevator pitch.
Right.
Okay, well, maybe listen too.
Yeah.
Like maybe ask some insightful questions and just try to learn something because we have to go in knowing we don't know everything.
Yeah.
And that's the best. Going in with humility and active listening is the best way to network. Instead of saying, what can you do for me? Go in thinking, how can I learn something from this event? How can I add value in some way? And maybe how can I make a connection for this other person that I'm talking to? Right. Yeah. So it's not kind of letting the imposter syndrome take over. It's recognizing that there's totally there's a muscle to be built going through this.
Yeah. I love everything you just said. And it's a thing that I definitely have seen, like in my own professional life. You know, like once you like, everyone likes to feel useful, right? I think Ben Franklin or whatever, he has all these crazy quotes, but one of them is like, if you want to endear yourself to somebody, like ask them for help, or if you want them to like you, ask them for, like, asking for favors is actually like a really clever way, because most people are nice, and there's kind of like a psychological hack you can do.
Oh, it's amazing what people will give you if you just ask them.
Right.
Right.
That's
But
another
if
thing.
you don't know, if they don't know that you need help, you're going to suffer in silence. They don't know that they can help you. But also basic psychology, right? People love talking about themselves. Just give them the chance.
Yeah. But this is an extraordinary thing for young people to take advantage of, or job seekers to take advantage of, you know? I mean, I'd be flattered if anyone wanted to learn about CRM administration, which I think is really interesting and cool. And like, I like it a lot, but like, you know, someone wants to talk to me, like, of course I'll talk to you about it, you know, like,
and I think that's really important for young people to hear, because, you know, I still tell my students at UNH, I teach a college to career class still. And just last night I was having this conversation with them about LinkedIn, like fortune favors the bold, guys. Like, don't shy away from reaching out to someone who's living and working in your dream job. Right. Like asking someone, hey, I love what you do. Like, your background's so fascinating to me. Could I pick your brain for 15 minutes and just hear about how you got to where you are?
Yeah.
Most people are going to give you that time, because like you said, like, I love my thing. I love talking about it. You know, it's like, I'm happy to give you 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I ran into a guy in BJ's yesterday, and I had met him before, and we got to chatting, and I don't know, I think he's going to call me. That's a professional.
Yeah.
That's a professional story. That's related to careers.
Yeah.
You know, he's a UNH sustainability student, and he's great.
Oh, cool.
But you know, like, you never know, like, that's kind of the beauty of all this stuff. Like, you can run into,
I always use that. Yeah. The standing in line at the grocery store.
Yeah.
And you turn around and someone's got like a logo on their shirt that's like a company you're really interested in. It's like taking 2 seconds and just saying, oh, what, do you work there? Like, little, like, a conversation can lead to an interview in 2 seconds. It actually,
I mean, you must have endless stories, but like, the one I always like to share, I mean, literally my wife found, at the time, what was a great job for her, because she was, I don't know, she listened to this podcast, and there was like a community online for people to talk about the podcast. And, you know, she shared some art that she did. She's a painter in the online community, and someone saw her art, and they commissioned her to do art for like an album that they were making. And she was so on top of providing like project updates for the art she was making, that they were like, wow, you're very professional. Definitely the most professional artist I've ever interacted with. Would you have any interest in working for my marketing analytics firm?
Amazing.
She was like, what do you mean?
Amazing.
Of course I would. And like, she got this incredible, like, you know, perfect, like fully remote, like really well compensated. Like, it was just the right thing for our lives at the time. And it's like, you couldn't even invent how bizarre that connection was. And that's just
then you say that to someone who's like, I've been submitting 400 resumes a month for blah, blah, blah. And it's like, like I said, fortune favors the bold, right? Being the person who's willing to follow up after a podcast interview, or ask a question in public, or, you know, it's just, I think people think, oh, well, everybody does that. I don't want to be bothersome to someone. I don't want to bug them.
They don't. Yeah.
And it's like, well, you got to shoot your shot.
Exactly. That's it. I think that's catching on for Gen Z. I hear people say shoot, which is a good thing.
Shoot your shot.
Do you feel like a lot of people are reluctant to ask for help?
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah.
I talk about this a lot, because I was that kid.
Yeah.
I always struggled to ask for help. I was first generation. I was very hyper independent growing up. Obviously had a lot of life things happen, lost early on. So you have to learn how to be very resourceful. And I think professionally, especially as a woman, you didn't want to be seen as weak or less than or unable to do something yourself. So we would work harder. I would work later. I would, you know, go to every possible corporate event and network with like the bigwigs that were there. And that, I saw that as part of my job.
Yeah.
I think when people have a tough time asking for help, that is its own challenge. And so you have to recognize that as a barrier.
Yeah.
You have to tackle that before you can even tackle the thing that you actually want to ask for help on.
Yeah.
But it's tough. It's if you come from, it could be cultural. It could be connected to gender. It could be connected to how you were raised. It's very hard for people to ask for help. I always joke that by the time people get on my calendar, it's the hardest part. It's just getting on my calendar for the intro call.
Yeah.
I give a free 15-minute intro call to any new client just to make sure that we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Am I the right resource for what you need? And I always tell people, now that we are connected, like I will Sherpa you through the darkness.
Right.
It's totally fine. You know, you have to get on the calendar first. But for a lot of people, they say, I've been wanting to make this phone call for like 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that says a lot, you know. I mean, it's not quite like confession. Like there's all these other professions that I think yours is not totally inappropriate to say it's tantamount to, right? Like, I don't know, confessional, like
it's like job therapy.
Yeah, for Catholicism or a therapist,
Yeah.
you know, like these times and places where people disclose their most, you know, intimate insecurities or failures or thoughts about themselves, right? And it's like that's not that different from, I think, what you do for people.
100%. I mean, I have a master's degree, but it's not in clinical psychology.
Yeah.
And so there are times when I tell people like, let me give you a referral, right? I need to refer you out for some of these things, right?
Because okay? Yeah.
they're real, you know, and luckily it hasn't happened too many times, but I do say in like my new client agreements that if I start to notice that there are mental health things going on that are actually the barrier to employment, right? That's not my lane, right? And I need to refer you out to somebody else. But there's, to your point, there's such an intimate piece to talking about employment with people, because think about it, your relationship with money, your relationship with authority, your relationship with how you see yourself. And, you know, so many of these things are very, very deep rooted. So when we start pulling at these threads, sometimes you connect to something that's very, very big for somebody that is not something that they were planning on talking about. They didn't make the connection. A lot of times, like, my value, my worth, right? Especially when we're talking about salary and all this kind of stuff. So much of this connects back to like who we feel like we want to be in the world. Yeah. And it connects back to who we are as an employee. And so those are things that I think people aren't always understanding as part of the work. Yeah. And so that's why I say when I work with people, it can be very layered. You know, it's not just transactional. Let's just look at the resume, polish this up and get you on your way. Right. Sometimes people will say to me, like if I'm looking at a resume, for example, and I see someone that has, you know, a lot of these short stints at companies, and I'm say, hey, help me understand what's going on here. Right. Yeah. Take me through the history. Oh, well, I left this company as a startup, right? There was no growth opportunity. Okay. Next one. Well, you know, I got there and then they didn't want to grow me. And it's like, okay, theme. Right. Yeah. And then the next one, same thing. And I'm like, even breaking down for people how they define growth might be completely different than how I would define the type of growth that motivates me, or the type of growth that the company is actually selling. And yet the word we all use is grow. Yeah. I want someone to grow me. But if you are more motivated by somebody growing your salary versus growing you by title, promotion, right? Mm-hmm. Or by scope, scale, influence, responsibility, power, right? Those are three very different types of fuel in the gas tank. Right. So if you have one type of fuel and I have a different type of fuel, and then we work for an employer, that the way they want to grow us is not the way that we actually need to be invested in to feel good about this trajectory. We now become resentful because now, quote unquote, we have been told that we were going to be grown and invested in, but all I want is a promotion. Right. All you want is more money. And all they're doing is throwing special projects at us.
Pure diesel, baby.
High test.
That's it.
Right. So it's like, you know, this is where I also tell candidates, like, you have to really be self-advocating when you go and interview. Right. Do you even know how to define the type of growth? A really good friend of mine, Brandon Thomas, I always give him credit for this quote. He says, understand what you value. Yeah. So not only, okay, you're motivated by growth in this form, but do you understand why? Right. And then do you know how to connect that to an employer that can actually provide that kind of growth for you? I have this conversation with people from startups all the time because they want to get promoted. And I'm like, they don't have the organizational structure yet. They literally don't have the layers to grow you in this way that you need to be grown. Yeah. But in the interview, all you said was, yeah, I'm looking for a place that I can grow with. And they're thinking, great, we'll just keep throwing them bonuses. Right. Yeah. And it's like, that's not a bad thing, but that's also not the kind of growth I'm talking about. So I'm going to feel like I'm plateauing in 12, 18 months when you don't promote me. Yeah. And now I'm leaving.
And they could have had that conversation.
We could have mitigated all of this. Yeah. So much of it is the communication breakdown, but knowing what you value, knowing how to articulate that and how to properly and compellingly self-advocate for that in an interview, I think can protect a lot of people from making those mistakes of joining an organization that actually wasn't right for them or couldn't give them what they wanted. But again, everybody's mixture of things looks so different.
Yeah.
What they need, what they want. There's a big difference between sacrifice and compromise.
Right.
You know, a lot of people make sacrificial moves for jobs and then get into it and they're like, oof, this is not sustainable.
I'm sure there are all these strange, more or less apt comparisons to like dating and romance.
Oh, don't even get me started.
You know, like, well, I don't know. I feel like a lot of the language and advice is not like, you know.
Mm-hmm. It applies.
Yeah.
It applies.
It's like you're trying to find the one, you know.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Let me just give an example. Another example of where we have to abandon common sense, right? This emotional sort of, I'm looking for my thing. I'm looking for that next company I can spend the next 15 years at, right? We have to move away from this mindset because if you're a candidate and you are looking at a job board and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to find that perfect thing today that I can apply to. What's good? And then you find it and you're like, oh my God, this is the one. This is the one. It's like, why are we walking down the aisle in our mind? We've not even had a first date with these people. They could be crazy.
Right.
What are we doing? We're letting ourselves run with the emotion. The emotion cannot be driving your job search. It has to be in the back seat if it's in the car at all.
Right. Yeah. Or even if that's the only thing, like it's, I mean, I think what I'm hearing you really getting at is some of our modern notions about work.
The work-life relationship has completely changed.
Yeah. I mean, it's in some ways it's cool, but it's also strange. Like, I don't know. Like, I think if my great grandfather listened to this episode, he would just be confused. Mm-hmm. You know, like he'd be like, what do you mean? I'm a machinist. And that's what or like I'm a farmer.
Yeah.
This notion of choice, I think, paralyzes a lot of people, which speaks to what you just said of like, you know, this myth that, you know, like if I can just find the blissful thing, you know, that doesn't feel like we're like, I don't know. People have all these weird notions about, what is the phrase? Like work as play, or like tell me how wrong that is. You know?
Yeah, no, I always, so the work-life relationship, as I describe it, instead of thinking of it as a vertical ladder, right? Of like, this is my relationship. I'm getting better at my thing. I'm growing in my career, right? Yeah. It's almost more like a pendulum that swings back and forth, right? Okay. So on one side, it's work to live. Yeah. And on the other side, it's live to work.
Right.
And I think our grandparents, if you even talk to them about being, you know, I'm just looking for a great culture and a job that I can be happy at. And they're like, what does happiness have to do with it? Like, are you serious right now?
What's for dinner?
What are you literally like put food on the
potatoes.
Plate. Yeah. Literally. And so when it comes to the pendulum swinging, I think this is really, look at COVID, you know, look at the amount of people that did all that introspection when we were locked up inside. And they're really coming to terms with the fact that, wow, you know, I really don't enjoy what I'm doing anymore.
Yeah.
And do I still have to stay here? And so, you know, there's no wonder to me why in 2021, we saw 47 million people quit their job.
Right.
And 50% of that 47 million completely changed function and industry.
Wow.
So the transition that is happening right now, which the ripple effects are huge, right? Yeah. That could be a whole episode. Like the resumes are going to look different now. Candidate backgrounds look different now. The way that we even talk about what we want from work, hybrid versus remote versus on-site, how we work, where we work changes how we feel about the work that we do. So this evolution and this disruption that is happening in our work-life relationship now, I think is an important one. And I think it's where employers need to try to be as responsive as possible. I call it managerial Darwinism, adapt or die, right? One size fits none, right? Lindsay Pollock's phrase. I just think there's a lot of mistakes that are being made in how companies are trying to handle this drastic transformation of how we actually engage with work.
Yeah.
And the ones that are being responsive, that are talking to their people, that are listening to their people, they're the ones retaining their teams.
Right.
And right now it is a hustle to retain. Nobody wants to be recruiting right now.
Well, it's like, let's experiment, listen to people, try different things.
Crazy concept. Listen to your people.
See
Weird.
What works. Yeah. Well, I mean, you're a very empathetic person. I'm sure you could. That I think is what you're so good at, is you can make anybody feel heard,
thank you.
advocate for them at the same time. And those aren't necessarily always aligned, right? Like outcomes. So people talk a lot now about Gen Z in the workplace. Everyone brings different opinions to what's the appropriate amount that, my parents can be involved and support me, but what's too much, you must have opinions about this.
Oh yeah. Parents will reach out to me a lot of times and gift their like college senior, for example. I have a 3-session package. It's like the new grad pack, right? So it's basically like all the things that a recent grad typically needs, right? Resume overhaul, job hunting stuff, LinkedIn, right? Road mapping. And that's always well and good when parents will say, hey, I want to help from a distance.
Yeah.
My kid's not listening to me, right? We've all been that kid.
Right.
And so that's kind of the best way for parents to go about that. The downside I would say is I do have some parents that are like, oh, I want to set up a session for my kid. And I'm like, great. And they're like, so I'm going to be there. And I'm like, nope, actually you're not. Right. Like, no way. Your kid needs to own.
Are you looking for work?
Right. That would be different. Right. Yeah. But like your kid needs to own this process or they're not going to take it seriously.
Yeah.
And also sometimes parents can be, I won't want to say a hindrance, but they could be the source of the anxiety. They could be the source of the barrier for the student. So that's been really great to work with a lot of parents that understand. They'll gift and then they'll get out of the way. When it comes to the workplace, so this is the first time in our history we've ever had a 5-generation workplace. Wow. I talk about this all the time with my corporate clients, right? Like great company, Eastern Propane, was doing this fantastic like management, boot camp kind of thing for their managers for the day. And they invited me in. We're talking about how to inspire and, lead and retain a multi-generational workforce. And when you think about 50 years of difference on one team, not in one company, but on one team, that means that the way that we define professionalism is very different. Your relationship with authority and what that work-life relationship expectation looks like is very different between multiple people on that team.
Yeah.
So it can cause a lot of conflict. It can cause a lot of communication breakdown. I think for Gen Z, what I love about this generation is they are, very aware that, when I think of some of my students during 2020, they had internships canceled. They had to get resourceful. They had to really, it was a depressing time. It was depressing for a lot of people, but the amount of resilience and bounce back that I've seen already from this generation has been really inspiring. So I'm excited for them to get into the workplace, bring their ideas, bring their ambition. I mean, I'm an older millennial, right? I'm 39. Millennial was a dirty word when I was coming out of school, right? Yeah. Nobody wanted to hire millennials. We were the most entitled. We were the most whatever. Yeah. Literally. I eat that almost every day for breakfast.
It's great, by the way.
But it's like, people have their stigma attached to their generation. We all have, right? So part of what I'm always telling my Gen Z, students, because I teach at UNH, and so I get a face full of them a couple times a semester, right? Yeah. And so it's wonderful. Like I tell them, you have so many options. You can be fully remote and travel the world and work. And this is something that people in my generation and older would have just thought was crazy. You had to be in a very specific type of role to have a company say, okay, you can be fully remote, And I think there's a big conversation now about, the fact that Gen Z actually wants to come into the office. Right. They had to do Zoom classrooms and all of this. They want to be in person.
Yeah.
But what I see from my clients that are what I would say the aging Gen Zs now, they've been out of college for maybe 2 or 3 years. Now they're starting to understand like, maybe now that I've been in the office a little bit, I feel like I have the structure I need. I want to get out of here. I want to do something different. Sure. Right. And I think because we have such a different conversation that's happening now about what that work-life relationship looks like, to your point, we don't stay at the same company for 40 years anymore, collect the gold watch and sail off into the sunset for retirement.
Yeah.
We have more stops, right? It's on average 4 years in a job now. It's just very different.
Right.
So they also can stay on their parents' insurance till they're 26 or 27.
Thanks,
so
Obama.
Oh my God. Seriously. I tell my students all the time, I'm like, you don't even know.
Yeah, this is a different thing. Yeah.
The hunt for health insurance was such a real thing, right? Yeah. You're playing rec league soccer, flag football or something, you sprain your ankle and you're $5,000 in medical debt. Right. It was a real thing.
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of advantages that they have to get out into this market where they can maybe take a few more risks than we could take. There's a lot of them starting startups, right? Yeah. They're highly entrepreneurial. So I'm excited. I mean, I'm not a fan of generation bashing. I think,
well, it's arbitrary, right?
Yeah,
arbitrary.
no, I worked with one organization and they had this great team, and it was funny enough. They had no millennials, they had no Gen X. So they called themselves the boomers and the zoomers. And it was just this fabulous, like they created this culture that was so hinged on this interesting, diverse team dynamic that they had. And they created cross mentoring and cross generational mentoring. It was just, I've seen it work so well. I have so much faith in that generation. So I'm excited.
Have a lot to offer each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So parents, it's fine. Get out of the way. They'll figure it out. I think change comes on the other side of discomfort, right? Discomfort's a hell of a motivator.
Push them out of the nest.
If they're in the basement, and they graduate and you're like, you gotta make some moves soon, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, give them a timeline. Hey, we're not gonna pay your bills after 6 months. Right. So you got to make some moves, right? Yeah. There's got to be some tough conversations, and
they may thank you for it later.
They will thank you for it. Exactly.
Thanks, Mom.
Yep.
For kicking me out of the basement. Just kidding. I'm not going to pontificate on how true that is or isn't. All right. Another thing I wanted to get your take on. Like, I had no idea that you had worked in prisons at all.
Sure.
No, really. It's a fascinating, like, there is such an intersection there, particularly given your work now, right? Like, I mean, even just the open question, like, what does it mean to be incarcerated? Mm-hmm. What does it mean to be employed? What does it mean to be employed while incarcerated or in prison or whatever the term that people prefer, right? Like, because that was on the earlier side of your career, it sounded like. I would love to hear you say or share what are some things that working with people in that environment, like what are lessons that you bring from that to your work today?
I mean, I think the biggest thing that I took away from that was, again, this was probably 2010, 11, 12 in that era. So again, opioid epidemic exploding. We had certain practitioners in Dover that were overprescribing, were now in jail. So this really, really affected the Seacoast.
Yeah.
And so I was at Stratford County in Dover, and they house female inmates as well as mental health folks. So very different than some of the other, like Rockingham does not, right?
Yeah.
So they have what's called the TC program, which is the therapeutic community. So they get, inmates have the ability to write a letter to apply to be in this program for their last, I think it's like 30 or 60 days that they're in. And so they get anger management, they go through yoga, they practice all of these great mindfulness, wellness, self-help kind of, modalities, and like really thrive in this environment. And it was proven to minimize recidivism, which is fantastic. Yeah. So this program had a GED kind of skill building kind of thing. But when I stepped in, they were like, hey, do you want to build a job skills program? So I would have the same group of men and or women for 3 weeks, and they would kind of graduate, they'd get a certificate, and then we'd move on to the next group. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that I stepped away with was the number of, I will never forget a woman that was in one of my groups. She said, listen, I was like your quintessential soccer mom. I'd never been arrested before. I had a great job. I had a family, right? I was literally driving my kids home from like some sport thing or whatever. And someone rear-ended us, and I had like neck trauma. Yeah. And I was prescribed oxys, and it just spiraled.
Wow.
And my whole life became, this hyperfixation on this drug. And so then when the prescription runs out or they cut you off, and then all of a sudden you start doing all these other things to get other supplementational drugs or supplemental stuff. Yeah. Right. So all of a sudden she's in jail. Wow. And now she's got to get out and rebuild her entire life. And the amount of empathy that I have for people who have served time, especially just because I think we've all known somebody at this point that's been affected by substance abuse or substance use disorders of any kind.
Right.
So for me, I mean, I'll never forget, the funny part was, I'm working at Hester College, right? And then I'm working at the jail. And I just remember being at like the bar in Dover, right? On like a Saturday night or something. And I've got like a Guinness in my hand and I'm just relaxing. And you see someone walking towards you, right? And they're like, Crystal? And I'm like, student or inmate, student or inmate, student or inmate. Like I'm racking my brain trying to be like, how do I know you? How do I know you?
Yeah.
Can't hug you either way. And I see the arms coming open, right? Like, hey.
Yeah.
And there was this one guy that was in one of my groups at the jail. And he's like, I just, I have 2 jobs and I have an apartment now. And it's like, that was an incredibly powerful moment for me because you don't always see what happens to those folks. It wasn't like my students, right? When they go off into the community.
Yeah.
So I just hope people have a lot of empathy. I would really, really love to see some reform around making it easier for people with felonies to get jobs. I think there's tax credits and there's work tax credit programs, but employers need to be more open-minded.
Yeah.
Because there are, call up Jake Collins at the jail and, in Dover, and he will set you up with a pipeline of talent, that's coming out, that's really excited to work and excited to rebuild their life. And I think there's just unfortunately so much stigma.
Yeah.
Still.
Yeah. Man. Well, that was great.
Yeah.
I mean, how many?
It was a powerful couple years. It was a draining, you're very on in that environment, right? That's a whole other thing. I also had people in my groups that I grew up with.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Humbling.
Well, it gets at, hopefully a recurring theme of this show is the notion of progress, right?
Absolutely.
On complex issues, and the fact that you're in there, that you were able to learn so much, and it's like it doesn't just go away. Like you built the program, you helped all those people. They, I'm sure, have their own networks of people that they told about it. Like the work lasts and compounds, right, in ways that you often don't. I mean, you get to be in the fun position of, often you hear the success stories from your clients, but I'm sure it happens where like you'll help people and then you'll never hear from them again. And
Totally.
And it's like, oh yeah, you changed my whole life. Thanks.
That I used to laugh that LinkedIn was like the only way that I would actually know what happened to my students half the time, right? Because they'd come in and I'd spend like 4 or 5 different sessions working with them, and then they'd go off and they'd wind up getting a job, but I wouldn't even know about it, right? And they're probably thinking they don't have to report back to me or anything, right? But I'm curious where they wound up, and then all of a sudden I would see the update on LinkedIn, like so-and-so, like it just accepted a new job. And I was like, yes, like they got the job, and I think with, it's like with what I do now with Job Talk. I mean, I'm very, very blessed, right? I see 400 clients a year, all different states, different functions, different levels. And I would say the majority of that business is referral based. Yeah. So like, I don't even pay for marketing. Like it's great. So sometimes I work with a client and then, out of sight, out of mind. And then 3 years later, somebody winds up on my calendar and under the referral box in the form they fill out says so-and-so's name. And I'm like, oh my, who? Wait, what? And then I'll get on the phone and like, yeah, they raved about how helpful you were. And I was like,
wow.
I never even heard from this person again. Like, I'm so glad it made that kind of an impact. I know. I'm like, can I get a Google review?
Yeah.
Like people just disappear into the ether sometime. But that's the part of my job that I love. Sometimes I just have 1 or 2 sessions with people and we remove the barriers and they're off and running. And then other times, people will be on my calendar, for every month or twice a month because they're treating me as like an accountability partner to their search. So I'm happy to live in either of those spaces for people.
Right.
And everybody needs a different kind of help sometimes.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to be a resource.
Well, we're happy to have you. All right. What do we got? Okay. 2 more questions for you.
Okay.
Real quick.
Okay.
Wrapping up.
Yep,
you said you were a bartender. What's your favorite drink? And tell me what makes you optimistic. It's funny. I often ask this question and I'll say, what makes you optimistic about the future of your work? But I might as well just say work for you. Like your work is work, you know? So, I mean, this entire episode has given me many reasons, but I like to just ask the question point blank. So favorite drink, optimism for the world of working people.
Sure. I actually gave up drinking in June, Oh,
okay.
Yeah. So
my favorite drink to prepare then.
Yeah, I know. I was a big fan of Guinness. If I'm drinking any kind of like beer of any kind, right? It's Guinness. Or like a tequila soda with some ginger beer, a little like Mexican mule action. Love that.
I feel like I had them here once and they were like, there's no beer? You're recording in a tap room. And I was like, He's nice enough to let me do this.
Yeah, I know.
It's like I can't
there's so many
siphon
great
off
taps in the
beer.
background here for people just listening. We're kind of in this great little little mini tap room.
Right.
But yeah, no. It's been great. Now I just love Olipop. I'm obsessed with Olipop. It's like the healthy soda. Yeah.
Oh, I've seen all
prebiotics and stuff.
Their root beer is
yeah.
great.
39 now. I care about lower sugar.
You care about the gut biome,
healthy GI. Yep. So, and then things, let's see. I mean, optimistic. I feel so optimistic about everything because I just think even though it is a very tough market right now, we have record low unemployment, which is a great thing, but we also have record high amounts of confidential searchers. So people who are very much working, but aggressively applying, which is creating a lot of volume in the market. So it's making it very hard for people to get a first round phone screen right now.
Yeah.
It's starting to loosen, but it's been very tight for the last 12 months. But I'm very optimistic because I see the changes happening on the employer side. And no matter what the market looks like, employers will always have an upper hand to an extent, right? Yeah. So I really feel inspired by how many employers are doing the right thing by people now. Are there bad eggs out there? Absolutely. That's all I ever hear about, right? People don't come work with me and tell me how great their company is. Yeah. So I have the shit list, I have the list of companies that I tell people to avoid.
Yeah.
But I just love it when some of my clients, especially my clients that are in HR, people management roles, and then they go and join other companies and they report back and they're like, this place is just as awesome as I was hoping it would be. And I was like, yes. So I do think that we're in a very different era where we're having a different conversation about what is the employer's responsibility to provide a great experience for people and to really look at your people as people. And understand that they need some flexibility. People have kids and they got to go pick people. We don't have a lot of support for parents in this country. People need different kinds of flexibility, people with aging parents. So I think the companies that are flexible and understanding and empathetic, they are the ones that are going to retain their people. And that gives me so much hope.
Yeah. And it's okay to show vulnerability.
Yes. Yes.
Where it's I don't think that was okay.
Again, holding up the heavy mirror,
right?
For some of these employers that maybe were making very control-based, trust issue-based decisions of how they managed. I mean, even now, the BBC came out with a great article recently, and they were saying how hybrid is profitable.
Right.
All the data now that we have, hybrid models are profitable. So the companies that are out here saying, well, we want to bring everyone back in 5 days a week. So now you're basically saying to your people, we don't make data-driven decisions anymore.
Right.
How are you building trust and credibility with your people?
You're not.
Right. And they're going to call you on the carpet about it and they're going to leave.
Right.
So yeah, but I'm hopeful. I'm excited.
All right. Well, we're all about that here. This has been so fun.
Likewise.
You're a perfect guest. You're a testament to everything that Granite Goodness is about. You're a
homegrown.
Boon. Yeah. Homegrown boon to the Granite State. We got to have you on again. And thank you. Thank you so much for being you and for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks so much. This is great.
Hey there. Thanks for spending some time with us, and I hope you enjoyed the conversation. You can learn more about today's guest and how to get involved with or support their work in the show notes. If you'd like to suggest a guest for the show or have any story tips for our Good News in New Hampshire newsletter, shoot me a message at hello@granitegoodness.com. Music for this episode was provided by the band Sneaky Miles, who hail from Newmarket, New Hampshire. Until next time, I'm the creator of Granite Goodness and the host of the Granite Goodness podcast, Andy DeMeo. Thanks for listening.